President of Healthcare Club, Hyderabad from PGP Core 21. Thank you for taking your time today to join us for our panel discussion on the future of healthcare. In previous panels, we have seen how existing businesses have been disrupted and how business models have evolved during the new normal. But how is the future shaping? What is the role of technology in healthcare? In current times, when consulting, diagnostics, and almost everything is happening at home, how are primary, secondary, and tertiary healthcare sectors evolving? In this panel, we'll discuss the emerging trends and opportunities in healthcare and how upcoming healthcare entrepreneurs and health tech companies can contribute to the reimagined health ecosystem. Without any further delay, let me welcome our panel, the leaders in health tech space. Our first panelist, John Axiriou-Celis, CEO and co-founder of Arteries. Arteries operates as a solution provider within medical imaging, making imaging diagnostics quantitative, intelligent, and available. Over the past 5 years, he has successfully developed 3 hugely successful healthcare technology products under Arteries. Thank you, John, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Our second panelist, Mr. Vaibhav Tiwari, co-founder and COO of Portia Medical. Amid this pandemic, he has conceptualized and executed remote monitoring solutions in partnering with state governments. This has not only reduced the burden on hospitals, but also ensured that there is timely testing and detection of COVID-19. Thank you for joining us today, Vaibhav.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Our next panelist is Mr. Arpan Malhotra, India Business Head for Diagnostics of Siemens Healthineers, who introduced Atelico solution for India that provides laboratory diagnostics for professionals with control and simplicity, so that they can spend more time driving better outcomes and less time on operations. Thank you for joining us today, Arpan.
Oh, thanks a lot for having me.
Our next panelist is Mr. Sandeep Lakshmipathy, Director of Edison Software, GE Healthcare. With more than 20 years of experience, he played diverse roles in technology and product management space. He leads several initiatives to accelerate AI product development across the healthcare products from GE, making it easier for data scientists to bring in AI-based innovations into medical devices. Thank you, Sandeep, for joining us here today.
Thanks, bro.
And finally, we have Rahul Chatterjee, Chief Growth Officer of iCure TechSoft. iCure is a social enterprise that delivers primary healthcare, wellness, and prevention services to communities in India through innovative technology, training frontline health workers, network of hub and spoke clinics, and focus on continuum of care. Thank you, Rahul, for joining us here today.
Thanks a lot.
This panel will be moderated by Dr. Venkat, who is a consultant radiologist for UK, NHS, and Ireland, Director, CEO of Excel Hospital, Hyderabad, Ambassador of RK Royal College of Radiologists, and Nikhil Inamdar of PGP Core 21, who is a healthcare enthusiast and also the President of Healthcare Club Mohali. Now, I would like to hand over the virtual mic to Dr. Venkat to moderate the session.
Thank you, Sushmita. Great pleasure to have all of you here, and thank you. Many of you have accepted my invitations last moment. I would greatly appreciate. So to start off with, being a doctor myself, a clinical radiologist, and working in the healthcare technology side of a healthcare provider since almost 2 decades, I have personally seen how it saves lives and improves outcomes. The topic for the panel is future of healthcare. So let me start with a broad question for all of you to set the tone. The talk of the town is that COVID has been a catalyst for innovation and adoption of technology. So can we call 2020 a year of revolution in healthcare technology and as a stepping stone for the future? So let me start by asking John. Special thanks to him as I managed to convince him to wake up early in the morning from California. Thanks, John. Over to you.
No problem at all. I would say 2020 is not the catalyst of revolution. I would say 2021 will be, or even maybe 2022, because what we're seeing is for sure a change in mindset in terms of first off, digital solutions, given by the fact that we're all on a Zoom call, and I'm seeing that. I'm seeing hospitals, health systems adapting to more telehealth, telesolutions, working at home, but it's still backed up. It's still kind of, budgets are an issue. COVID-19 is impacting other operations, so we still have to see how things are going to shift here. But for sure they will, and it's a catalyst. But it's not something that startups like us can take advantage of. It's more we have to work with what's given to us in a way. We have to collaborate. We have to not just think about bottom line, top line. It's about really trying to make an impact.
Thank you, John. That's very insightful. Can I have Mr. Sandeep, please? Sandeep, what's your opinion on the same question, please? What do you think is happening in 2020, and how do you see the future based on this?
No, definitely, I think it is a catalyst in different ways, and this catalyst, need not end in 2020. And as John said, it's probably definitely going to be a multi-year catalyst. We see a lot of mindset change, which was very important. Probably what would have taken probably a decade to really have this acceptance. I think this has really got compressed into 6 months or 12 months. So that's the real mindset catalyst. The other thing is the technology push, also the push towards digital. What was going at a steady pace is just taken off. There is a lot of demand, and every company, every provider, every software company, every hardware provider, healthcare provider is grappling with that stuff in order to put out the best solution out there. So there is a this is also a catalyst in a way. So this is all definitely helping accelerate things. What typically, for example, what we would have seen probably in 2025 or 2030, a lot of those things we are already starting to discuss them, start working towards them, and very soon, you will start seeing solutions, actually end-to-end solutions really come out. Healthcare, for example, will definitely never be the same what 2019 was. For example, 2021 will be very different. And this is the inflection point, you can say.
Thank you. Very nicely spoken. Mr. Rahul Chatterjee, iCure. So Rahul, can you tell me about your experience with iCure, please? How the year has been, and how do you think the future is going to be based on the experience we had in this year?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Venkat. So, I agree with what John said. In the month of April, May 2020, we actually thought that our revenues for the year would go up because we were a primary care company. We were a health tech company focusing on population health, and we thought everything was right for this to be a bumper year for iCure. Q1, Q2 did not turn out that way for us. Q1 was disastrous. Q2 was better, but in general, the first 6 months we were down. But what happened is, again, to add to what Sandeep said, some of the changes which were happening in the industry for the last several years suddenly got accelerated. For example, the technology got a push, acceptance of telemedicine increased a lot, the legislations were faster, not just in India, but even in the US. And from the iCure perspective, we see a couple of things happening. Our assisted telemedicine is getting a boost. We see increasing spending by the government in strengthening primary healthcare infrastructure. And in the month of August, we won a very large order in Nagaland for telehealth. We see a lot of push towards increasing the business model towards a nurse-led primary healthcare delivery to address the shortage of doctors. We see telemedicine getting integrated with other specialty treatments. And Dr. Venkat, one question which you asked about this being a revolutionary year, I believe certain changes which have happened have been to address the short-term disruption of COVID. I don't know to what extent we would sustain them. But to a large extent, some of the changes which are addressing the overall healthcare infrastructure, I think they would be sustainable, especially the ones which are impacting business cases. And that would be interesting to discuss, that what are the changes which we think would be sustainable and which would be very short term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vaibhav. Rahul. And we move on to Mr. Vaibhav Tiwari. Vaibhav, what's your experience been? Because you're Portea, and we are hearing a lot about Portea helping out the patients within their homes, ambulatory clinics, blood samples collecting from home. Do you think, this is going to be staying for a long time? What is the future you think is going to happen? Over to you.
Dr. Venkat, he seems to have dropped off. He's not yet. As soon as he's back, I will inform you. But as of now, he seems to have dropped off.
Yeah, okay, we'll move on. We'll move on to Mr. Arpan Malhotra. Arpan, nice to have you here. So from Siemens' point of view, Siemens is one of the pioneers in adoption of new technology, digital growth related to healthcare. What do you think, in your experience, has been in 2020 so far, and what do you see the future? How it's going to be? Is it going to be sustainable in this manner? Is it going to grow more? What is your opinion on that?
Thanks, Dr. Venkat. In fact, I was fearing I hope you don't pass on the Portea question to me, because I have no clue. But thankfully, you didn't do that. See, I will restrict my comment to when we say healthcare, and I'm part of the diagnostics, and I'm talking about the in vitro diagnostics. Yeah, so all the names which have now become layman names, like RT-PCR, antigen, antibody tests. You go to a society, and they would be talking technical jargon. So that's the area that I'm going to talk about. And yes, I mean, as Siemens, we are one of the, I would say, I would like to believe that in laboratory diagnostics, we are, the prominent player. And to your question, Dr. Venkat, that what did this situation lead to when it comes to the diagnostics as an industry? One would feel that it would have zoomed up like anything. Yeah. And the answer is yes, on a new portfolio. So when it comes to, let's say, molecular testing, and altogether new market got added, that should have always existed. Just to give you a sense, India recorded number of labs, and use recorded, identified, the reports say that there are more than 100,000 labs. And before COVID happened, less than 2,000 labs had molecular ability, which obviously now has become 5 times, in a span of 5-6 months. So, that's what happened to the market. A portfolio which was total a mess. Suddenly, all labs, all hospitals, they need that, and it's there in rampant. But there's another side, that the routine testing that went down, especially April, May, June. If you look up all the national players, whether it is Dr. Lal, Thyrocare, Metropolis, SRL, I mean, the testing dipped by 70-80% during that period, and then it got. But as of today, it's come back very well, because during lockdown, that just died out. And if somebody was gonna get vitamin D tested, if that period is lot, the person will not come back and get it tested twice. So that's what happened. There was a significant dip on one side on the routine testing, but the other one took up. Way forward, as you asked, Dr. Venkat, I believe it was a much needed realization for a greater good that has happened. And I echo what the other panelists said, that it has expedited the pace. And that's what's very clearly looking like, whether it is diagnosing, or whether it is patient care. For the right reasons, it's going to stay up and go up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very insightful. Mr. Vaibhav Tiwari. Vaibhav, I don't know whether you heard my question, but it's the same question that we are running through. What are your thoughts on 2020 so far, especially with your work being Portea and home care, etc.? Do you think it's going to change the future in healthcare in any aspects?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Venkat. And it's a future of healthcare depending on technology. And I had some tech issues, so we know that, okay, everything is not great in technology where we stand right now. But I'm back. And just to talk about 2020, I mean, just to give a quick background, Portea works in the home care space, what we call outside the hospital healthcare. And of course, have been supporting patients with various healthcare services in the comfort of their homes. And when 2020 started, of course, everything was looking very rosy. Things were looking up. And with the whole COVID thing coming into play, a lot of things changed.
I think you're breaking up, Mr. Vaibhav.
Venkat, Nikhil, let's go on to the next
with all the
question.
lockdown and everything, we knew to come to their homes because everybody is afraid of us. But what happened for COVID actually in that end of April, after that, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a bit. I think it'll be better if you turn off the video and maybe we can try and hear you more clearly.
Yeah. So then when basically government allowed home isolation to be done, then basically we looked at how we can create a solution which is totally tech-led, and we could offer this whole home isolation to the patients and manage them along with the government. So we launched this first program along with the Delhi government, which was basically started in May beginning. And just to give a perspective, this whole home isolation program was created along with government completely remotely, because of course at that time also lockdown was on and we could not meet anybody. So everything, whether us, other partners for us, as well as government, all of us created that completely remotely without meeting each other. And the whole idea was that once patient tests positive, government sends us a list of all the positive patients who can be home isolated. And we, with a combination of teleconsultation, both by healthcare workers and a doctor, and on-ground coordination with government for any of the emergency management, manage these patients at home. And we launched this program in the beginning of May, completely telemedicine driven. And the work basically with Delhi government, and then over a period of time with 7 different state governments. And we have been doing it for last, maybe last 7 months or so, have managed close to 230,000 patients in home isolation successfully in last 7 months across seven different states, with 97% patients, of course, recovering from home itself. 3% patients ended up going to the hospital, and less than 0.1% mortality. Basically, helped government save significant resources, of course, hospital beds as well. And this was done totally remotely with all the teams, ours, government, some of the government doctors, everybody coming together using only technology. I mean, we have a fairly sophisticated patient engagement platform. All the doctors will log into that and do the teleconsult for the patients, and the whole treatment plan, everything was managed in that same system.
Excellent.
Now,
thank you, Mr. Vaibhav. We'll come on to the details in just a bit, but I'll want to hand over the virtual mic to Nikhil. Nikhil, please take over from now.
Thank you, Dr. Venkat. I have a question to start with for Mr. Rahul Chatterjee. He did talk a lot about providing last mile healthcare solutions in rural settings, right? So one of the questions that we had from the audience also was in the assistive telemedicine. Do you see this traction being perceived well by the patients as well? Because end of the day, it's a matter of trust. So how are patients perceiving it? And as a consequence, is this a sustainable change that the governments can look into for providing better last mile healthcare solution?
Yes, Nikhil, thanks a lot. This is a great question. So my answer is yes to both parts of your questions. I actually believe that one of the outcomes of COVID-19, which is sustainable and long-term, would be a task shifting or a task redistribution. What I'm trying to say is, traditionally, a lot of the tasks which a primary care physician has done through proper training, protocols, and technology, those tasks should be taken up by the nurse. This makes immense sense because doctors are in short supply in a primary care setup. In infrastructure, trained nurses are more available than a trained doctor. And also for a primary care intervention, it is expected that a hub and spoke model with a nurse-led delivery model should be good enough. Coming to your question of trust, the way we build trust in the community is through continued of care. We ensure that the nurse or a trained paramedic is the first point of contact. We maintain continuity of care through technology as well as through the physical contact. We ensure either a doctor is available once a week or anytime through telemedicine. So, Nikhil, did I answer your question?
Yes, you definitely did. Just a follow-up question on that, on leveraging predictive analytics. You know, a lot of talk about AI, ML, and do you see predictive analytics as a tool to ensure that the same doctor who spends a single day spends it effectively with a lot more patients?
Yes, but not so much with the predictive part which you said, Nikhil. We at iQure believe that any AI/ML application which can reduce the need for a specialist is useful for us. Our experience with AI/ML tells us that an AI/ML solution to read an X-ray or to read the image of a retina of the eye and do a mass screening for diabetic retinopathy is more useful than, let's say, using predictive analytics to predict a heart attack, because we are a primary care setup. So Nikhil, we use AI/ML, we partner with AI/ML companies to do mass screening, and that we think is very powerful because it reduces our dependence on a trained ophthalmologist at the remote places, not for actually predicting, but for reading a X-ray, reading a ECG. That's where we like to use AI/ML.
Sorry. Thanks a lot for that. I think this is where I want Sandeep to step in and give a perspective from GE Healthcare. You know, as a medical device manufacturer, I think they would be able to talk on the other side. Yeah, Sandeep.
Sure, no, definitely, Nikhil. You know, one thing is, you know, you were saying that, can AI/ML help doctor, address more number of patients? I would look at it in a different way. For example, you know, the way we look at it is, for example, whatever a lot of AI solutions that GE Healthcare and a lot of all of the other big healthcare companies are trying to roll out. They're probably our aim here is that, can the same doctor spend more time with the patient rather than just analyzing the report? So the quality of care, if it goes up, I think that's one purpose served. That's very important. So that, the trivia stuff, for example, let's say, as our panelists were saying, that there's a lot of load because of COVID. It can help, okay, this is the critical risk, high risk patients, these 100 people. And if I can spend better quality time with each one of them, talking to them, empathizing with them, if a solution helps in that, that's big. I think that's definitely, where a lot of focus goes in. It's not just the quality, numbers, not just qualitative, but the, both qualitative and quantitative, both things are important. It's not that we sacrifice the numbers because of that, but a lot of these things definitely matter because, countries like India, China, emerging economies where healthcare, a lot of strain has been on the healthcare because of the COVID stuff. And definitely a lot of these advanced technologies, AI/ML, or even the traditional ones, generally digital in general, right, has definitely helped, improve the quality of care, probably faster access to healthcare. A lot of those aspects, AI/ML has a big role to play. And what we use it for depends on country to country, product to product, really depends on what we are comfortable using.
Right. I just have a follow-up question on that here. A lot of people, when we talk about AI/ML, it's all in the air, right? We have a 10,000 feet perspective of, okay, just plug in AI/ML in a sentence and there's a tech innovation right there. But as someone who leads the AI team at GE Healthcare, what is it that's really happening? And where do you see the solution?
This is not just fluff. Definitely, there are real stuff that's happening. If you just see the recently, concluded RSNA, you will see that every big healthcare company, GE, Philips, Siemens, everyone are talking about a lot of AI solutions, AI workflows, orchestrating these workflows and stuff like that. And there are real problems that are being addressed. I mean, yes, definitely, I think, there is way more, AI, ML, everything, plug AI, ML to everything. But I think the reality is that it's, I don't know whether it's as big as the hype or not, but I don't know about the hype part of it. But really, the products that are rolling out today, the products that are going to roll out in, next year or the year after, AI is definitely, moving the needle. There's a lot of difference on the ground that's happening because of these solutions that are coming there. So it's here to stay. It basically,
Right.
it's not just pure jargon and is going to go away. I think this hype part will slightly, die down, but the reality will settle in, and AI definitely is here to stay. Is my personal.
Right. So I mean, we are getting a lot of questions from the audience also. Could you give us one example where GE, for example, has been using AI ML?
Definitely. For example, if you check out for pneumothorax detection, right, the congestion stuff, there is a very nice, you can actually visit one of our GE portals and, upload an X-ray and it will predict you, hey, what is the pneumothorax condition. That's a classic example where in second, less than a second, we can give a determination and tell you that, hey, what is the probability of that stuff. It just helps in accelerating this. And there's a very clear thing which is already in our products, which is rolled out, which is getting used. So one pneumothorax detection is one classic example, just on top of my mind.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I'll also get John here in the discussion. I mean, a lot of it has been talked by Sandeep already. So where do you see the next 3-4 years in this?
Sure. And I'll echo what Rahul said. It's not really about the technology and AI. Honestly, I think the adoption is going to come from what's the business model? What's the ROI? And I think the reason why you're seeing a lot of those screenings is because first, yes, it's simpler from a technology perspective because it's a point solution. You're trying to target one specific thing, and that it can also run in the background, and potentially you can get reimbursed for these things. The challenge on the predictive side and on kind of the using analytics for trying to determine what's going to happen to these patients, it's a little bit, at least from the US perspective or Europe, it's who's going to pay for it. If you have a flag to say, okay, this patient is going to get cancer in 5 years, it's a big question mark on how you monetize that. So that's one thing that I can see influence adoption. But just to echo what Sandeep said, if you can target very specific types of problems and have them be integrated into the workflow, almost from an invisible fashion, you will get that adoption. And so we've seen that in areas where it's the most invisible, you'll get the highest adoption. And by most invisible, essentially like 0 clicks, 0, looking at other screens. But that becomes a challenge because, for folks already looking at screens who are interacting with, in our space, images, it's fairly easy to weave it in. But for frontline nurses who aren't used to looking at screens, how do you integrate AI? And we've seen it. It's like, yeah, you can put up a TV in the emergency department to say, we predict that 10 more patients are going to come through. You have to change mentality, change training. Like adoption is very, very hard. And I've been doing it for 10 years, and it's not something that will come overnight. But to Sandeep's point, like it's for sure here to stay. It's overhyped, sure, but it's happening. There are the great areas where it is impacting, diagnostics and treatment decisions. But again, it's going to roll out over the next 10 to 15 years. And people say that, at least in radiology, that AI can replace the radiologist, and no way that's going to happen. I don't see that happening over the next even 10, 15, 20 years. Yes, it can help automate specific types of detection and pathologies and quantification, but it's going back to the patient. It's going back, how are you going to work with the patient, the referring physicians? I think that's where we're going to give more time to the specialists to have those insightful conversations based on these automated reports.
Right. I think a brilliant point on the service provider's point of view, right? So Arpan, like, how do you see this fitting in? I mean, when Siemens Healthineers wants to design a product or a solution for a service provider, a doctor, where do you see the gap? Is there a gap in what companies want to offer and how the adoption is from a service provider as well as the last mile patient?
Okay, I presume, Nikhil, your question is in continuation for the artificial intelligence.
Right.
See, as you know, as John also very rightly mentioned, that artificial intelligence, it is happening. Yeah, Whether it is, happening at a magnitude which we presume it to be is a different question, but it is happening. It will continue to happen for the simple reason that it's a beautiful shift in the value chain.
Right. Yeah.
There are pieces which let the the synergies, energies of the, let's say, limited resources get occupied in doing repetitive things which they should not be, because they are not in as much availability, whether it is the doctor's time, whether it is let's say pathologist, and in this shift will actually happen at more and more pace as the time goes by. Coming to specifically diagnostics, if you go 10-15 years back to what you see today, there has been a pace where you can clearly see the artificial intelligence, in the sense now when a diagnosis happen, a diagnostic panel happens, there are pieces to it where certain conclusions can be driven basis learning from the past. I mean, there are technologies where the image of let's say a cell structure can be compared with millions of pre-stored images with those patient histories, and throw some very near conclusion or indications, let me not call them conclusions, which can really make the task for the clinicians in serving the patient matter very different from what it used to be before. So as technology provider in the diagnostic space, that is clearly the way that we are also taking in that sense.
Right. Thank you. Back to Dr. Venkat.
Thank you, Nikhil. Next question is to Sandeep. Sandeep, what I feel is, as a radiologist myself, the artificial intelligence, machine learning, or any kind of technology is perhaps greatly going to change one field, which is radiology in medicine. If not any other fields, radiology is perhaps the most affected. Now we're going to talk about whether it's going to be affected in a good sense or in a not so good sense. So what I want to hear from you, your perspective, is that as a leading engineer in software, healthcare technology, what do you think is going to, where are you seeing the future going to be with specific medical imaging side of it? And can we have a peek about what GE is doing regarding this?
So definitely, Dr. Venkat, I think you're right. The radiology is definitely most impacted. I think it's probably in a positive way. And as John was also saying, it's a multi-year impact, right? Nothing, changes overnight. Even COVID, for example, the amount of change that it has brought about is drastic. But when you see it from a long 2-decade perspective, it is like a slight shift. Radiology is definitely impacted because the amount of opportunity that something like deep learning has in order to look at the images, understand what the radiologist would do, mimic the same thing, is going to help make the radiologist more efficient at the same time, so that he can actually concentrate on what he has to concentrate, probably look at the patient deeper, spend more time with the patient, things like that. And definitely the fact that, will it eliminate the radiologist? I don't think so. I think, for example, GE Healthcare, any of these things we usually joke about, there is no question of eliminating the radiologist or replacing that stuff. That's not the whole point at all. It's, in fact, it will make the radiologist more efficient so that they can look at deeper problems. For example, there are things that probably AI/ML finds it very hard to solve at the moment, because natural intelligence, human intelligence is still way ahead compared to artificial intelligence. So you can then shift your focus to deeper problems. Let's say, for example, dementia is an unsolved problem. Probably they can spend a lot more time in these kind of things and probably leave the trivia stuff for the AI/ML to take care. In GE Healthcare, for example, there's a lot of focus that we are putting on. We are developing a lot of models, a lot of solutions that have AI stuff, but we are not probably going to be able to develop all the thousands of AI models that are necessary. So we're looking at an AI ecosystem, so that there are a lot of players out there who are very specific focus. For example, Arteris is one of them. Actually, we partner our MR team. When I was in the MR group, 3 years ago, we were actually integrating, with them, and we still do that stuff, where we integrated because they have a very specific focus. They solve that problem very well, and we use Altair's solution for that stuff. Similarly, there's a lot of players in the AI space where specifically someone is looking at lung nodules, or someone is looking at, brain tumor stuff. That's their specialization, and we can go integrate with them and partner with them, rather than, just think about, we are going to invent all the AI models. I think that's not going to happen, because unlike any other general technology, AI is also, the models are better the moment you have a lot of diversity to that stuff. If the data sets are coming from Taiwan, India, Vietnam, US, great. Unlike other products where, okay, for example, I'm just going to build the product in India in isolation, that's great. But my AI model is only better when there is a lot of data, because the demographic diversity, everything makes my model better. Otherwise, it's brittle. So ecosystem is a very important thing. GE is focused on building this AI ecosystem, and actually that's where I think probably our focus is going to be the next 2 to 3 years. Over to you, Doctor.
Very interesting. Yeah. So you when you said that we are not going to replace the radiologists, I remember when I was a junior doctor way back 2 decades ago in London when I was training, we were all told that it's useless to become a radiologist now. You're going to be out of jobs in 5 years by the time we come out passing. But yeah, obviously, it's never going to happen. But the interesting point
we love to work with the radiologists, because our, for example, for my team, for my software team and data science team, the radiologist is the best friend, because, the radiologist is the person who is actually guiding us to build better models, and a 2, 3, 5% improvement in the model, only a radiologist, who knows it. The human intelligence just cannot be replaced. Not yet.
Yeah. So the real intelligence still stays. Moving on to John. John, we are from the ISB, the Indian School of Business, and I want your opinion on the following question. There are many companies all over the world, artificial intelligence, machine learning, radionomics. They're all startups. They're all having a investor backing. Many investors are pumping in lots of money. What do you think is going to happen? There are 500 plus AI companies all over the world vying for the top spot. And as Sandeep said, there are these numerous, specialities which each and every company is picking up. What do you see is the future? Let us think about 2025. Are they going to survive? Obviously not. Who's going to survive at the end of the 5 years?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I would say it's a fairly simple answer. The companies that have the clearest path to revenue will survive. And it's not about technology. It's not even about adoption. If you can show revenue, ultimately the VCs, the investors will believe in the company, and revenue talks. We're honestly, like, that's, at least from a US perspective or from a European perspective, that's what really matters to make a startup survive on the long term. Yes, you can have some early indicators of success with great clinical data, and that can give you kind of first Series C seed or Series A investment. But if you're going to be a long-term player in this, you have to convert that into revenue. So I'll give you one example of a company who has thought about the easiest way to get there, and they're using AI to basically automate sending an email to folks that missed their yearly mammograms, for example. And basically what they do is it's not even AI. It's basically, if you can automate the scheduling, what's happening is that those patients are then being alerted, oh yeah, I should schedule that, and go and go and get that exam at that outpatient imaging center. And so there's a connection with that, with the scheduling company and the imaging center, and they get some percentage of that revenue. And so they've been able to show some great traction just with a simple model, which is honestly not even clinical, and it's not even intelligent in a way. It's just an operational thing. And so that's why I really focus on, when I look at startups, the ones that will survive, the ones that have some sort of path to revenue. Yeah.
Interesting. But what do you think about these companies having their own specialist fields? Obviously, as a hospital owner myself, as a small hospital owner, I want to just have one platform, just one company dealing with all imaging modalities. So what is the solution for that? Do you believe that there should be more companies like an umbrella, combining all the modalities in one view? And if so, what's that business model? Obviously, we have other big companies which are developing hardware and software as well. For example, GE and Siemens. So what do you think of these numerous startups in their own specialist fields? Do we have a solution for that?
Yeah, so it's distribution is a challenge for these startups, because if you're going to hire your own sales teams, it just takes time. The sales cycles are long. If you can partner with GE, Siemens, and the large vendors of the world, for sure that that could help accelerate adoption. Now, if you're going to do it alone with a point solution, it's going to be a challenge. Now, you can do it, but you can't grow to hundreds of people. You can have a small business of 10, 15, 20 people and just grow in that point solution and grow and double revenue, quadruple revenue year over year, and you can survive like that, and you can grow. But if you're trying to be a company that is a prominent player in any one of these ologies, or radiology, one of them, for sure, you need to be broad in terms of your solution offering. And of course, the big OEMs are doing that. And like, as Sandeep mentioned, having partners join on board and have a broad offering is really important. But if you're going to be an independent, you do need to have that breadth. And of course, what Artis is doing specifically is like having one integration with that health system, and then have partners provide that breadth of solutions. So for sure, I see the future. When you are interacting with images, ideally you want one interface, one portal into all of that intelligence, all of those AI models, all of those AI vendors, as opposed to having to sign into 10 different systems. So that's the future, but we're still early in that.
Excellent. Very nice. Let's bring in Rahul now. Not a radiology perspective, but healthcare in general. Obviously, your platform has got telemedicine, AI, ML, EHR, bits of everything. Do you see small companies bringing in their own specialities into your company and integrating with them? Or would you like to go yourself, developing each and every step on your own? How do you think your business model is going to be? And what is your advice for people looking into these aspects?
So we, Dr. Venkat, we like to think of iCure as a digital health platform. We position ourselves as a population health management company. So our focus is, can we maintain patient medical records at a community level, identify high-risk population, do a stratification of the population, manage the patient when he's at home, when he's in our clinic, when we refer him to a hospital, and post-discharge, we request the patient, share your data with us. So we have the digital platform to do this, and we also run our own clinics and engage our own community health workers. So we have a feet on the ground, as you say. To answer your question, no, we do not want to do everything on our own. So we constantly look at integrating third-party technology players. They could be digital point-of-care devices. They could be sensors and wearables. And they are increasingly AI companies. And I'll just go back to something that John said. Our experience tells us, because over the last couple of years, we've seen several AI companies who engage with us actually go out of business. Now, I know I said it in the sequence did not sound right. Their going out of business had nothing to do with engaging with us. It's just that the business model was not integrated with the overall care providing task. So what I mean is, let's say there's an AI company which can read the image from a fundus camera, the image of the retina, and within a few seconds say if the patient has diabetic retinopathy or not. And if the patient should go for a dilated pupil examination. Now, for this company to be successful as an AI company, it should be part of somebody's care plan. This company needs to be integrated with somebody's treatment protocol or mass screening protocol. But to answer your question, we would like to continue developing our core platform, which has telemedicine in it. But for telemedicine to be really effective, it has to be integrated with EMR. It has to be integrated with the overall population health management, and eventually with all diagnostics. All diagnostics, wearables, manage at home, remote care. So we don't want to do all that. We work with companies which give us the APIs. We work with digital devices, and we work with a host of partners.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Let me hear the perspective from GE and Siemens, the two big companies, leading the way forward. What do you think? Do you believe that small AI companies or small ML companies or small technology companies integrating with your bigger company is a good business model, or do you want to develop the whole thing? I know that you've got some scanners with AI built in within it, so that is one model that I already know. But do you prefer to integrate many companies under one umbrella, or do you want to do everything on your own? And which model do you think will be successful?
So I'll take a stab at it. So definitely, I think integration is the way forward, because I think the reason is this. For example, let's say that someone already has an FDA approved AI model, right? And let's say that I just start the development of that AI model today. Let's say I'm convinced of the business case. I, as GE, going to start it today. I'm probably 18 months away from getting the FDA approval for that stuff, and I'm going to lose an opportunity here. So if there is a well-proven AI model and there is a need for that, and let's say some markets are asking for it today, it is in my business interest to go ahead, do an integration. That's probably a month or two, couple of months, with a fast turnaround stuff, and roll out the solution and address the need that is current, that is present, and and look at how it goes. So that's very important. And definitely there are certain critical things. For example, there are a lot of things which probably a startup is not focused on. A lot of things. For example, there are a lot of AI models that are there in our MRI scanner, for example, the CT scanner stuff. These are, they take longer period to build these things, and probably only those people who have the scanners make sense for them to build that stuff. So that no one else is going to build it. We have to develop it in-house. So there is a very clear stuff about, very clear differentiation about, we know what we want to build, what is, what we can go and partner. So it's a case by case, we make the determination and go ahead with that. So I'm over to Arpan for his thoughts.
Thanks, Sandeep. The answer is yes, Dr. Venkat. I believe that this possibility of integration and coming together of global player with the local smaller, as you rightly said, I would say that immense potential. And the reason why I say so is, there are advantages attached to the smaller, and I will continuously use, when I say smaller, I would rather say local, players. And the most important one is the localized know-how. So while we as global companies, we will have, let's say, modus operandi of addressing a clinical need, which, by product design, but at the same time, each country has a local ecosystem. And anybody operates as part of that local ecosystem. So there will always be a need, if I'm sitting in India versus sitting in Japan, where, every lab would want to have a track, even if they are putting one system, versus I go to Australia, where the top, 8 players will be 70% of the market, factory labs. Each country, each environment has a very specific ecosystem. And when we, our offering, we have to integrate as part of that ecosystem. These smaller companies, they will bring two very, very critical advantages. First is local know-how. They can do that more integrated, more deeper. Second is speed. They can do it at a very good speed. We have, as Siemens, I can tell you, you can visualize that when in a lab we set up, whether it's an automation setup, the whole ecosystem is not just that lab. It needs to integrate, starting from the patient collection, coming up to there. Then, eventually it has to serve the clinician and the patient. And there, these, local AI companies, I believe, we have actually had some very good experiences already, by doing some nice collaborations. The answer is yes.
Thank you, Arpan. I just want to build on it and take Vaibhav's opinion on two things. One, you mentioned about the ecosystem, right? Domestic players have a huge role to play here. So two questions to Vaibhav. One, of course, a lot of focus on fintech and e-commerce, but how do you see that traction with health tech in both from a investor's point of view, at the same time the domestic players taking charge in this year?
The way we look at technology players, big or small, I think John rightly said actually is that from our perspective, patients should be willing to pay for it, for the particular technology. I mean, we have enough and more point of care devices. So who's willing to pay for it? India consumer, by and large is very value conscious. So how do you make sure that that value is getting delivered actually? And a patient is willing to pay for it, whether in home setting, in clinic setting, or in hospital setting, taking the same argument forward. That's point number one. And second, in many of these new technology health tech companies which are coming up, are doctors willing to use those readings from our perspective? I mean, end of the day, a doctor has to say, okay, this particular technology you can use. A doctor is saying, I'm okay with this report actually. I mean, we see many of those cases which come up and doctors say, no, this report is not good. You go and check this kind of machine and only you can do it from this lab or this kind of technology, which is approved, which I am fine with actually. So any new health tech startup or established company, also these two stakeholders become very, very critical. So, and we of course evaluate these things quite a bit because we reach out to a lot of patients in their homes, and whether it's like ECG machines or even like testing blood, pathology machines and things like that, all of those point of care devices have these two questions to answer. And we are seeing in many places, I mean, patients are willing to use it basically for you to get additional information and to be supported, but not many places patients are willing to pay for it actually. And that's what probably causes most of these companies to have an issue with the business model. That's how we see it.
But what about the perspectives that investors have? Do you see a lot more traction from investors in health tech space?
Now we are seeing actually, if you see even last year, there was tremendous interest. Even now it is there. But of course, I think the same question has to be answered. What's the business model? How will people use it? And how will they pay for it actually? And that's something which becomes very, very critical. Of course, it's a long haul. Anything which you invest in healthcare, whether product or services, is a long haul. It doesn't work like a regular health fintech startup or things like that, because gestation period is very high. Now, what we see, at least in this year, is the first time, both from a user perspective as well as from a medical fraternity perspective, technology in general is a lot more accepted. Actually, this year, if you see whether from hospitals, doctors, everybody, they believe that healthcare can be delivered using technology a lot more openly than what it has ever been. Actually, I mean, hospitals have been doing teleconsulting, specialist consults have been there. We ourselves, I was mentioning in the initial part, during COVID management home isolation, have done close to 5 lakh teleconsults over a period of 6 months. So that's a kind of acceptance from the patient side, government side, as well as the medical fraternity side. So that's something which is there. But of course, time will tell, because it has hit a peak. It will probably come down a little bit. It will settle somewhere in the middle. But I would see investor interest increasing a lot more in health tech in the coming year also than what it has been so far, because I would believe that the business cycles are getting shortened now. I mean, that probably a year to a couple of years have been cut down from the acceptance perspective, adoption perspective.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question there again, slightly taking away the attention towards AI and ML. What other problems can entrepreneurs look to solve with the experience that you bring in Portea? What can people look into solve problems in healthcare in India?
I think the 2-3 things which have opened up significantly post-COVID. If you see from our perspective, even see worldwide, if you see most of the deaths which happened initially in COVID were all the elder care homes in the European and America. So in India, elder care is a very, very big opportunity. The way we see it, it's a combination of technology as well as being present on site. But I would believe that India, with its 12 to 15 crore people who are 60 plus, and who will be wary of going to hospital or going to clinics in near future as well, even after vaccination comes and everybody gets inoculated. I would say there's tremendous opportunity to create solutions for elderly population along basically from a healthcare perspective. Second thing which we believe has again tremendous opportunities on the chronic disease management, where again technology plays a very critical role. So it's like that again, I'm bringing back to saying what users are willing to use and pay for. I would say that, okay, diabetes management has been there for a long period in this country, but that is one. But everything else, I mean, pulmonology related problems, sleep related problems, a lot of other things which are there, which people are seeing as an issue. See, earlier, these things were given saying, okay, this is how I live with it. I mean, if I get a chronic disease, I live with it. But today, people are a lot more open to basically making sure that they take care of it, because now you know that, okay, this comorbidity can be a big issue for you if you were to catch COVID or something like COVID, which could come up again. So I would say these are two: chronic disease management as well as elder care could be two big areas in this country, which will require solutioning, which will require thinking, which will require a combination of remote management as well as on the ground management. And I think should be a big opportunity area for entrepreneurs to go for.
I think there we go. We have an entire ecosystem right here. All the small, the domestic players can set up their own company that set up the problems, and then we can leverage platforms from Siemens and GE to leverage the solution. But then, I mean, this is where the whole integration piece also comes into picture, right? So I have a question for Rahul here. So what are the challenges then? I mean, you have traction from medical device companies, you have traction from technology companies, you have startups willing to solve problems. Where is the missing piece?
So in the primary healthcare, Nikhil, the biggest challenge is who's going to pay, in the sense, you see, when we talk of health and wellness, there is a prevention part of it, there is a wellness part of it, there is a promotion part of it, and there is a curative treatment part of it. Unfortunately, the experience has been in India, you like to pay for the treatment. John mentioned very early on in this discussion that who's going to pay a provider who says, I am going to prevent you from falling ill. So come to me, I am going to do certain things with you so that you never fall ill. You don't have to go to a hospital. That's a good thing, but how do I get paid for it? I actually believe that the two areas that Vaibhav mentioned have a huge opportunity. Now, without repeating that, I feel that an entrepreneur who's working in the private sector would find an opportunity to create integration platforms, both for chronic care management and elderly care. Now, what do I mean by integration platforms? Integrate an EHR, electronic health record, with telemedicine, with IoT-based smart devices, with synchronous, asynchronous care delivery, so that the patient has a seamless experience. I'll just take 30 seconds and elaborate so that it doesn't appear fuzzy. Now, for a chronic care management, it's a long-term management. Let's say diabetes management is long-term. So being able to manage the patient's electronic medical record, to be able to create a care plan for the patient on the system, to be able to integrate, let's say, an insulin pump, to be able to collect remote data, to be able to provide a platform where the patient can do a synchronous chat with his endocrinologist and at the same time share offline report. All this requires a tech platform. And I am stressing this as Vaibhav did, because I believe you would be able to create a package and sell it, that please buy the diabetes care package for me. It costs so much for an annual subscription. Otherwise, we fundamentally see technology is not the challenge, Nikhil. I am sure our tech players can develop anything, but we'll have to be able to propose value and outcomes. And that's the reason I really like the two examples that Vaibhav gave. So the opportunity is to create a tech platform integrating everything.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions from the audience. One is on regulatory approvals. So Sandeep, do you want to say quickly about AI/ML regulatory approvals in the Indian healthcare context, please?
So definitely, I think the regulatory approval part is evolving. Whether it is India or whether it is the US FDA. So the governments are also figuring it out. Now what is the right amount of data, for example, to say that okay, this model is really good for this population set. And definitely, as anyone would know, regulatory in healthcare is generally long drawn. So add to this mix of it being completely mission driven. So there's a lot of apprehension about do I have the rights sufficient amount of data? Is my AI model backed by the right diversity of data? So a lot of these aspects that the regulatories will start looking at. For example, I've developed an AI model in the US. I want to bring it and get an Indian regulatory approval. We're going to look at, hey, has this, how effective is this for the Indian population? Does it really take care of the diversity of the Indian population? So a lot of those aspects definitely play a big role. So this whole regulatory space for AI/ML as such in particular is very much evolving, and FDA, for example, in the US definitely is doing a great job in really coming out with a lot of materials, putting out there so that companies can go understand this space and try to come out with them.
Same question for Vaibhav. I'd be very interested to know, does Portea need any kind of regulatory approvals for home care, for example? Can doctors go and visit patients at home and give the same care in terms of legal aspects of it? What do you think is there any regulations that need to come into your industry, you think?
As of now, so far, we have been all covered by clinical establishment regulations. So, every time we set up an office in any city, we also have to set up a clinic, which basically means that patients can come there and consult a doctor, and the doctor can go to patient home and also talk to them. But it's an interesting question, Dr. Venkat, because home care in general was always like an add-on for last 5 to 7 years. But after COVID, in every government regulation came or every government directive came, home care got covered quite actively, actually. Interestingly, because you raised this point, of course, regulator is one part of it. For the first time, government, IRDA basically mandated that COVID home isolation was covered by insurance companies. It's for the first time IRDA said, let home care be covered by insurance. So I would say that, of course, regulatory environment will become easier, but in general, using technology and providing support to patient at home will only gain momentum, actually. One more thing I wanted to add, actually, I think basis the earlier discussion we were having, I think one more area where technology is very critical, and of course, we are discussing AI, ML, and what else we can do from a service provider's perspective. But I would also say one thing which is changing from a healthcare landscape perspective in the future will be how the patient engagement happens. I would say healthcare in general was averse to patient engagement in many ways, because everything has been transactional. In many ways, the patient comes to hospital, you finish the treatment and you go back, right? But I would say in the future of healthcare, patient will come into the center. So how do you engage with the patient? How do you make sure that, and all those our digital health missions and everything will just make sure the way we had number portability in telecom, the patient also becomes the king in this particular case. So we have to make sure that technology investment happens, and how do we engage with the patient a lot more than what we have done as healthcare providers in the past. So I would like to bring that to the notice, where there again significant investment will happen, where patient engagement becomes very, very critical. Actually.
Thank you.
So
thank you so
also
much.
A big area of investment as well, and for entrepreneurs as well.
Thank you so much. Same question to John, just one last minute remaining. John, what do you think is regulatory approvals US point of view? Because all the Indian companies or companies world over look to FDA as the gold standard. And what do you think, business-wise, is that the gold standard that we have to reach to maintain or to sustain the business in the long run?
So I would say yes right now. I think in Europe with CMARC, they're a little bit more open to and maybe a little bit more progressive, but maybe I wouldn't say as safe. I think that the FDA really is one of the highest barriers to entry. I would say maybe China is a little bit higher because there's been virtually zero AI clearances there. But US FDA has spent a lot of time, there's a lot of guidance documentation online. But the one thing I'll say about them is that they're very open. So they're very open to have conversations, And there's nothing obscure about their process. If you follow the guidelines, if you provide enough evidence to show that it is safe and effective, you will get cleared. It's not like they're trying to hurt you. It's like, and there's been documentaries of the FDA trying to screw with companies. No, like honestly, our experience is like they're very nice and open. And if you follow the regulations, it'll be fine. It'll get through. So like I said, I think the things are shifting now toward maybe post-market surveillance, which means that they won't really, like be so emphatic about what's the current accuracy, but what they're more interested in see how it's actually impacting live when it's deployed. And I think that's where we'll see a shift. And that's where I want to see a shift, because it's ridiculous that companies are getting cleared based off 510K clearances 20 years ago. Those algorithms don't work anymore, but they're on the market. So that shift to post-market surveillance is the future, and the FDA regulating companies as opposed to products. And then once a company is cleared, then they have free reign to do whatever they want. It's like that mentality would be fantastic.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate all the time from the panelists.